There's a kind of loneliness nobody teaches you how to name. It isn't about living alone. I've lived alone for 6 years now, ever since my husband David passed. That kind of loneliness you learn to carry. You make peace with the empty side of the bed. You stop setting 2 plates at dinner. You get used to the sound of your own breathing in a house that used to hum with someone else's life. No, this loneliness is different. This is the loneliness of still having a family, children who still call you mom, grandchildren whose birthdays you still remember, a group chat that still pings every few days, and slowly, quietly, realizing they've stopped really seeing you. And the worst part, the part that broke something deep inside me, they don't know when they stopped looking. And neither did I. Not for a long, long time. It happened so slowly you can't point to the day. There's no fight, no door slamming. Nobody's wrong exactly. It's just, one morning, you wake up, you pour your coffee, you sit down in your own kitchen, and you realize you have become background noise in the lives of the people you poured yourself into. Like a radio playing in another room. They know it's on. They've stopped hearing the song. My name is Hannah Washington. I am 58 years old. I live in the Cascade Heights neighborhood of Atlanta, Georgia, in a 2-story wood frame house my husband and I bought in 1992 with a down payment we saved for 7 years. I was a pediatric nurse at Grady Memorial Hospital for 30 years. I raised 2 children. I buried a husband. I sang in a church choir, and then I didn't. I tended a garden, and then I let it die. And somewhere along the way, I lost myself so slowly I didn't even notice I was missing. Before you scroll past, before you decide this is just another sad story from just another old woman, I want to ask you one thing. If you've ever felt invisible inside your own family, if you've ever stared at a phone that didn't ring on your birthday, if you've ever caught yourself saying I'm fine so many times you forgot what fine actually feels like, let me tell you how it started. The first thing I want you to understand is that it wasn't always like this. If I tell you the ending without telling you the beginning, you won't feel what I felt. You'll just think, another ungrateful family, another sad old woman. And that's not the truth. The truth is more complicated than that, and the truth is harder. The truth is, we had something beautiful once. Let me take you back to a Sunday morning in the spring of 2018. David was alive. He didn't know yet that the tiredness in his bones was pancreatic cancer. I didn't know yet either. None of us knew. That's the mercy of that morning. That's why I can still go back to it in my mind, the way you go back to a photograph you keep in a drawer and don't look at too often because it hurts too much. I woke up at 6:30, the way I always did. The bedroom was still dim. David was already up. I could tell by the sound of the faucet running in the bathroom down the hall and the low, rough hum of him singing. He was always singing in the morning. Marvin Gaye, mostly. Sometimes Al Green if he was in a particularly good mood. That morning it was What's Going On. And he was getting the low notes wrong, the same way he'd been getting them wrong for 30 years. I lay there a minute, just listening. You don't know, when you're inside a life, that those are the moments you'll ache for later. You don't know that one day the faucet will be silent and you'll hear the sound of your own heartbeat instead, and it will feel like the loudest, loneliest sound in the world. I got up, pulled on my robe, the old blue one with the frayed cuffs, the one Amani kept telling me to throw out. The one David said made me look like his grandmother from Montgomery. I liked that. His grandmother was a beautiful woman. I went downstairs in bare feet. The coffee was already brewing. David always set the Pyrex percolator the night before, the way his mother had taught him. It was the same percolator his mother used. She'd left it to him when she passed in 1994. Glass with a stainless steel handle, older than I was. I've never tasted coffee as good as the coffee that came out of that thing. I don't know if it was the percolator or just the hands that made it. The kitchen smelled like coffee and butter. I had biscuits in the oven, my grandmother's recipe, written on a yellow index card I kept in a tin on top of the fridge. Alabama biscuits. Real biscuits. Not the kind that come out of a tube. My grandmother was born in 1911 in a little town called Greensboro, and she used to say there were 2 things a Washington woman needed to know how to make, biscuits and peach cobbler. And if she didn't know those 2 things, she wasn't really grown yet. I pulled the biscuits out, set them on the stove to cool. The butter melted into the tops in small golden pools. Through the kitchen window, I could see the back garden. My garden. That was my pride back then. I had collard greens coming up thick and dark on the left side, okra in the middle. The pods were still small, but by July they'd be as long as my fingers. Heirloom tomatoes climbing the trellis David had built me out of old fence wood the summer before. Cherokee purples and brandywines and a yellow one called Dixie Golden Giant that gave fruits the size of softballs. David had built that trellis by hand. Took him a whole Saturday. He kept hitting his thumb with the hammer and swearing in a way he thought I couldn't hear from the kitchen. Outside I could hear a mourning dove. You know that sound, that slow, soft four-note call. I used to think it was a sad sound. That morning it just sounded like home. David came down the stairs. He was already dressed for church. Gray slacks, a white shirt, no tie yet. He kissed the top of my head on his way to the coffee pot. "Morning, Mrs. Washington." "Morning, Mr. Washington." We'd been saying that to each other for 30 years. It never got old. I don't know why. He poured 2 cups, put mine in my hands, sat down at the kitchen table, the walnut table he'd built with his own hands in 1995, when Darius was 3 and Imani wasn't born yet, because we couldn't afford the one I wanted from the furniture store, and he said, "Baby, I'll make you one better." And he did. He really did. That table has fed 3 generations. There are still tiny scratches on the underside where Darius used to run his toy cars when he was little. David opened the newspaper. I buttered a biscuit for him. Outside, the dove called again. It was just a Sunday. Just an ordinary Sunday in an ordinary life. But I want you to remember this morning. The coffee, the biscuits, the garden, the mourning dove, the sound of David humming. Because everything I'm about to tell you, every slow, small loss, begins here. In this kitchen, in this ordinary light. Let me tell you about our children. Darius was our first. He came in September of 1991, a hard labor, almost 23 hours. He was a quiet baby, serious eyes, even as a newborn. People used to say that boy looks like he already has opinions, and they were right. He did. He grew up to be a thoughtful, careful man. He had asthma bad as a child. I spent more nights than I can count sitting beside his bed, counting his breaths, running the nebulizer, singing him old gospel songs until his chest settled. There's a particular kind of love that grows between a mother and a child who has been sick. You become part of their breathing. You never quite get over it. Darius went to Georgia Tech on a partial scholarship, studied computer engineering, got a job out in Seattle after graduation with one of those big tech companies. I'm not going to name which one, but you can probably guess. He met Tasha at a work retreat in 2017. Tasha is a good woman, a kindergarten teacher. Warm eyes, good laugh, Midwest manners. Her people are from Chicago. They got married in 2020, during the pandemic, a small ceremony on the bride's parents' back lawn in Bellevue. I flew out, stood at the front in a cream-colored suit I'd bought at Macy's, cried through the whole thing. They have 2 babies now. Malik is 7. Zoe is 4. I've only seen them in person a handful of times. Seattle is a long way from Atlanta. Imani was our surprise. She came in 1996 when Darius was almost 5 and David and I had decided we were done. I cried when the test came back positive. Not happy tears, not sad tears, just shocked tears. David just laughed and said, "Well, Hannah, I guess God has plans we don't." Imani was her own storm from the moment she was born, loud, stubborn, smart as a whip. She talked early, walked early, argued with her big brother from the time she was old enough to form a sentence. She had this laugh, this big belly-shaking laugh, that you could hear from 3 rooms away. Imani went to Howard University, then Georgetown Law. She's a civil rights attorney now in Washington, D.C. She married Jerome in 2022. Jerome works in finance. I've never quite warmed to Jerome. He isn't unkind. He just has a way of looking at people like he's doing calculations on them. I try not to hold it against him. I want to be clear about something. I don't want you to hear what's coming and think my children are bad people. They're not. They were not. They are not. Darius is a good man. He sends money to his old church. He coaches his son's soccer team. Imani mentors young black women going into law. She works on voting rights cases pro bono on weekends. They are good people in the world. They just stopped being good to me. And I am going to tell you how it happened. And I am going to tell you how long it took me to see it. And I am going to tell you that if you have ever been a mother, if you have ever given and given and given until you forgot where you ended and your children began, Some of what I say is going to sound like your own story. And that's why I'm telling it. Because nobody told me any of this was normal. Nobody said, Hannah, this thing you're feeling has a name. And I had to figure it out alone. At 58 years old, sitting in a quiet kitchen on the 8th of February, on my birthday. But we'll get to that. First, I have to tell you about David. David Washington was 59 years old when he started getting tired. It was the spring of 2019, a year after that Sunday morning I just told you about. A year, almost exactly. I remember because the tomatoes were coming in, and I was canning them, and he came into the kitchen in the middle of the afternoon and sat down at the walnut table and said, Hannah, I think I need to lie down a while. David didn't lie down in the middle of the afternoon. Not ever. Not once in 31 years of marriage. I should have known then. But you don't want to know those things. You tell yourself he's just tired. He's been working double shifts at the Ford plant. He's almost 60. A man gets tired. By May, he'd lost 15 pounds without trying. By June, his skin had started going a little yellow around the edges. By the time we got him to see a doctor, a good doctor at Emory, it was already stage 4, pancreatic cancer, the kind that eats you in months, not years. He died on the 4th of September, 2019, in our bedroom upstairs, in the bed we'd shared for 31 years. I was holding his left hand. Darius was holding his right. Imani was lying across his legs, her face in the quilt, sobbing so hard I thought she'd break. His last words to me were, "Baby, take care of yourself. Don't let them forget you." I didn't understand what he meant. Not then. I thought he meant the grandchildren. I thought he meant make sure Malik knows who his grandfather was. I thought he was asking me to keep the memory of him alive in our family. That is not what he meant. I know that now. He knew them, my children. He had watched them grow into adults with their own lives and their own ambitions, and he had seen something in the way they were already starting to drift that I hadn't let myself see. He had seen maybe what was coming, and with his last breath he tried to warn me. Don't let them forget you. He wasn't telling me to remember him. He was telling me to remember myself. At the funeral, Darius and Imani stood on either side of me at the graveside. The Baptist cemetery on the south side of Atlanta, the one where David's mother and father are buried. It was a hot September day. The cicadas were screaming in the trees. Pastor Anthony Crawford, who had baptized both my children, who had married David and me back in 1988, who had known our family for 35 years, stood at the head of the grave and said things I don't remember now. What I remember is Darius's arm around my shoulders. He was 27 then. He looked so much like his father in that suit. He leaned down to my ear and said, "Mom, we're going to take care of you. You're not going to have to worry about anything. We're right here." And Imani on the other side, her voice thick with tears. "We'll always be here, Mom. Always." I believed them. God, I believed them. I don't blame them now for saying it. I think they meant it when they said it. I think in that moment, standing over their father's grave, they meant every word. They just didn't know yet how their lives were going to grow up and over them like vines. They didn't know yet that you can love someone from very far away and still, somehow, forget them. I went home from that cemetery, and I walked into my empty house, and I took off my black dress and hung it in the closet next to David's suits, and I lay down on our bed and I cried until I couldn't cry anymore. Then I got up. I washed my face. I went downstairs. I made a pot of coffee in the Pyrex percolator, and I began the rest of my life. I just didn't know yet what it was going to look like. The first year after David died, my children were good to me. I want to be fair about that. I want to tell this story fair, because otherwise it isn't true. Darius called every single Sunday without fail from Seattle. Sometimes we'd talk for an hour. He'd tell me about work, about Tasha, about a trip they were planning. He asked about my garden. He asked if I was eating. He asked if I was sleeping. Once, about 3 months after the funeral, he flew in for a whole weekend just to mow the lawn and fix the back porch light. Things David used to do. He didn't even tell me he was coming. He just showed up Saturday morning with a hardware store bag and a box of donuts and said, "Mom, let's get this place ready for spring." Imani drove down from D.C. for Thanksgiving that first year. She brought Jerome. They weren't married yet, just engaged. She helped me cook. She slept in her old bedroom upstairs, and I could hear her up in the middle of the night moving around, and at breakfast she told me she'd been going through her old yearbooks. She cried a little. I cried a little. We hugged in the kitchen, and she said, "Mom, I miss him so much." And I said, I know, baby. I know. They were good to me. Year 1, they were good to me. I want you to hold on to that. Because when I tell you what came next, I need you to understand. This wasn't a story of bad children. This was a story of good children who slowly, gently, without ever meaning to, stopped showing up. And I need you to understand that the slow version is, in some ways, worse than the cruel version. Because with the cruel version, at least you know what happened. At least you have something to be angry about. You have a moment you can point to. With the slow version, there's nothing to point to. There's just you, years later, sitting alone in a kitchen, trying to remember the last time anybody asked how you really were, and finding you can't remember, and wondering if it was your fault, if you did something, if you asked for too much, if you should have been quieter, smaller, less needy. That's the trap. That's the real trap. You start shrinking yourself to fit the space they still have for you, and you don't even notice you're doing it. Year 2 began with Darius's wedding in Seattle in August of 2020, in the middle of the pandemic. I flew out alone. My first time flying anywhere without David. I remember sitting on that airplane in my mask, looking out the window at the clouds and thinking, he should be in the seat next to me. He should be here to see his son get married. A woman across the aisle saw me crying and handed me a packet of tissues without saying anything, and I have thought about that woman many times since. Sometimes strangers see you more clearly than family. That's something I learned later. That woman, I will never know her name, was the first stranger who saw me in a long line of strangers who have seen me better than my own blood. The wedding was small, 20 people, on Tasha's parents' lawn in Bellevue. Tasha's mother, Linda, had organized everything. Linda is a nice woman, retired dental hygienist. She had done all the flowers herself. There was a table of photographs. Tasha as a baby, Tasha in high school, Tasha and Darius on their first trip together. There was one photograph of Darius as a little boy that I had given Linda weeks before, by email. I found it on the table, in a small silver frame, in the corner. After the ceremony, Linda hugged me. She said, "Hannah, we are so glad to have Darius in the family. He is such a wonderful young man." In the family. I smiled. I said, "Thank you, Linda. He really is." I did not tell her that something inside my chest had just gone a little cold. I did not tell her that for the first time, I had felt the quiet, specific pain of a mother watching her son be absorbed into a new family. Not replaced, exactly. Just added to. Diluted. One mother among two. That night, back at the hotel, I sat on the edge of the bed alone and I thought, this is how it's supposed to go, Hannah. This is what you wanted for him. Don't be small about it. I flew home the next morning. The house in Cascade Heights was very quiet when I opened the front door. I stood in the foyer a long time with my suitcase still in my hand, and I listened to the quiet. That was the first time I noticed it. Really noticed it. The particular quality of the silence in a house where no one is waiting for you. I didn't cry. I just stood there. And something in me, some small part I hadn't yet learned to hear, whispered, "Hannah, pay attention." I didn't listen. Not yet. I put down the suitcase. I went to the kitchen. I put on the Pyrex percolator. And I made myself a cup of coffee in the house where I used to make 2. Year 2 was the year the phone calls got shorter. I don't mean Darius stopped calling. He didn't. Not yet. He still called on Sundays, mostly. But the hour-long calls became 40 minutes, then 30, then 20. And the 20-minute calls started to have this rhythm I began to recognize. He'd ask how I was doing. I'd start to answer. And somewhere in the middle of my answer, I'd hear him say, in that particular way that means I'm not really listening anymore. I'm looking at something else. The first few times I noticed it, I made excuses. He's tired. He's busy. He's got a lot going on at work. Tasha just started a new job. The pandemic was hard on them. There's always a reason when you love someone. There's always a reason to forgive what you're seeing. But I started doing something I'm ashamed of now. I started practicing before I called him. I would sit at the kitchen table with a notepad and write down things to talk about. Short things. Interesting things. A funny thing Miss Ruby from next door had said. A news story from the AJC. A recipe I'd tried. I was curating myself, rehearsing myself, because I could feel, without being able to name it, that he had less patience for me than he used to. And I wanted to be worth the time. Think about that. A 60-year-old woman rehearsing her own conversations with her son so she wouldn't bore him. I didn't see it then. I see it now. In November of 2021, I went for my annual physical. I hadn't been going regularly since David died. I kept meaning to, kept putting it off. But I finally went, and the doctor found a lump on my thyroid. A small one. He sent me for an ultrasound, then a biopsy. I want to be clear. It turned out to be benign. I was fine. I am fine. The doctor just wanted to monitor it every 6 months to make sure it didn't change. But I didn't know it was benign yet, the week I was waiting for the biopsy results. That week, I was scared. I was very, very scared. I had watched my husband die of cancer 2 years before. Every time I swallowed, I could feel the lump there, small and quiet, like a pebble in my throat. I couldn't sleep. I would lie awake in our bed, my bed now, and I would put my hand on my neck and I would think, not yet. Please, God, not yet. I'm not ready yet. I called Darius on a Tuesday evening, the night before I was supposed to get the biopsy results. I needed to hear his voice. I needed my son. He picked up on the 4th ring. Mom, hey, can I call you back? I'm about to jump on a meeting. Oh, okay, baby. It's just, is everything okay? I paused. I was standing in my kitchen. Evening light through the window. The Pyrex percolator on the counter. The yellow index card with my grandmother's biscuit recipe stuck to the fridge with a magnet shaped like a peach. I could have told him. I almost did. I had the words lined up in my mouth. Baby, I'm scared. I have a biopsy tomorrow. I need you tonight. But I heard something in his voice. A kind of distraction. A kind of please don't give me one more thing to carry right now. And I have spent my whole life being the mother who doesn't give her children one more thing to carry. That is what I was trained for. That is what a good mother does, I thought. She absorbs. She manages. She doesn't burden. So what I said was, no, nothing important. I just wanted to hear your voice. Go to your meeting. Okay, Mom. I'll call you this weekend. Love you. Love you, baby. The line went quiet. I stood in the kitchen a long time after that. The light outside the window had started to go gold. I could hear a dog barking somewhere down the street. I put my hand on my throat, over the lump that might have been cancer or might not have been, and I thought, he didn't ask again. He didn't hear something in my voice and ask again, the way I would have heard something in his voice. That was the first time I felt it, not as a thought, as a physical thing, in my chest. A small cold space opening up just under my collarbone, as if someone had touched me there with an ice cube. I did not call Imani that night. I don't know why. I think I was afraid of what I would hear, or not hear, in her voice too, and I did not want to know. Not yet. I went to the biopsy alone the next morning. I sat in that waiting room alone. Dr. Patel came in and told me it was benign, and I started crying in relief, and there was no one in the chair next to me to hold my hand. When I got home, I made myself a cup of tea. I sat at the walnut table. I texted the group chat, the one with Darius and Imani, a short message. Good news. Thyroid biopsy was benign. Doctor just wants to keep an eye on it. Love you both. Imani responded an hour later. Oh, thank God, Mom. So relieved. Darius responded that night, around 10 p.m. his time. Great news, Mom. Glad everything's okay. Neither of them asked what biopsy. Neither of them knew I'd had one. I had never told them. I sat there looking at their replies, and I realized something that I pushed down immediately. Something I would not let myself look at directly for almost 3 more years. They did not know I had had a biopsy. They did not ask why I had had one. They did not ask if I was scared. They did not call. They just sent their emojis and went back to their lives, and I was supposed to feel held, I think. I was supposed to feel grateful. I closed the phone. I put it face down on the table. I went upstairs. I got into bed. I pulled the blue quilt up to my chin. The one my mother had hand-stitched in 1987, the one with the Dresden plate pattern, the one I have slept under my whole life. And I told myself, Hannah, you are being dramatic. They love you. They're just busy. This is what it means to have grown children. That was the first lie I told myself about them. It was not the last. The following March, on what would have been David's 64th birthday, I decided to cook his favorite meal. I hadn't done it the year before. The first anniversary of his birth after his death. I couldn't face it. I had ordered Chinese food and watched television with the lights low and gone to bed at 9. This year I wanted to do something. I wanted to honor him. I wanted to feel him in the house again. I made fried catfish the way his mother had taught me. Buttermilk and cornmeal, cast iron skillet, the oil hot enough to hiss when the fish hit it. I made collard greens with smoked turkey, the way he liked them, slow cooked until the broth was dark and rich and a little sweet. I made cornbread in the same cast iron skillet his mother had used. She'd given it to me when we got married, and I have used it 3 or 4 times a week for 37 years. I made a small pitcher of sweet tea. I cut a slice of lemon for the glass. I set the table for one. Before I sat down, I took a photograph. The catfish golden on the plate, the greens steaming in the bowl, the cornbread in its black skillet. I sent it to the group chat. Cooked your dad's favorite tonight. Thinking about him today. Love you both so much. I sat down. I ate alone. I had set a photograph of David on the table across from me, the one from our 25th anniversary, where he's laughing at something I said, his whole face crinkled up. He was a beautiful man when he laughed. Some men get handsome with age. David got beautiful. I ate slowly. I talked to him a little. That sounds crazy, but I talked to him. I said, I made it the way your mama taught me, baby. I put in the little bit of sugar in the greens the way she said. I still can't believe I learned to cook from her. I ate maybe half the fish. Put the rest in Tupperware for the next day. I cleaned up. I washed the cast iron by hand, the way his mother taught me. No soap, just hot water and salt. I dried it with a towel. I put it away. I checked my phone. Darius had hearted the photo, a red heart reaction on the picture. No words. Imani had written, "Miss him too, Mom. That looks delicious." I stood in my kitchen, in the yellow light over the sink, and I stared at my phone. No one had called. Not one of them had picked up the phone and called their mother, on the first birthday of their dead father, to see how she was doing. I want you to understand something. I am not telling you this because I wanted a parade. I am not telling you this because I thought they should have flown home. I would have been happy with a phone call. 7 minutes. 10 minutes. Hey, Mom, thinking about Dad today. How are you holding up? That's all. That's all I wanted. I ate breakfast out of that catfish Tupperware for 3 days. On the 4th day, the fish had gotten soggy and the greens had turned. I scraped all of it into the trash, and I did not let myself cry about it. I told myself, Hannah, they have their own grief. They process it differently. Don't make it about you, which is a thing women my age have been trained to do since we were little girls. Don't make it about you, as if our pain is always a kind of imposition, as if we are always supposed to carry our own sadness privately, quietly, on the side, so that nobody else has to notice. I had been a mother for 31 years by that point. I had no idea how to stop. Here is where I have to tell you about the message I was not supposed to see. It was June of 2025, almost 6 years after David had died. A Tuesday evening. I had just come in from the backyard. I was still trying with the garden then, though it had started to slip away from me. The trellis was leaning. The okra wasn't coming in right. I had sat out there an hour pulling weeds, and my back was hurting, and I was standing at the kitchen sink washing my hands when my phone buzzed. It was the family group chat. Darius, Imani, Mom. That's what it was called. I wiped my hands. I opened it. There was a message from Imani. It said, Tasha texted me that Mom called Darius again this week. That's like the 4th time this month. I know she's lonely, but y'all, I literally cannot with another hour-long call tonight. Can one of us call her this weekend so she stops blowing up his phone? Then, 3 seconds later, oh my God, wrong chat. Delete, delete, delete. Then the message disappeared. But I had seen it. I stood at the kitchen sink with my wet hands and my phone, and I read those words 3 times before they disappeared, and I memorized them, because I knew, even then in the first moment of it, that I would need to come back to these words later and look at them and understand what they meant. Another hour-long call, so she stops blowing up his phone. I know she's lonely. I set the phone down on the counter. I stood there a long time. The water was still running in the sink. I reached over and turned it off. The house was very quiet. Outside the kitchen window, the evening was settling down over the garden. The light was gold the way it gets in Georgia in June. That soft, heavy, honey gold that makes everything look like it's underwater. I thought about the last conversation I'd had with Darius. I had called him the Sunday before. We had talked for, I counted now, about 35 minutes. I had thought it was a nice call. I had thought he had sounded happy to hear from me. I had told him about Miss Ruby next door, who had fallen in her bathroom and bruised her hip. I had told him the okra wasn't coming in right. I had asked about Malik's soccer team. I had asked about Zoe's preschool. I had asked about Tasha. I had asked about his work. I had done, I realized, almost all the asking. He had told me one story about a project at work. He had told me Malik was doing fine in school. He had said Tasha was busy. He had said everything was fine. 35 minutes. Most of it me asking, and him answering in sentences that got shorter as the call went on. And afterwards he had hung up and apparently texted his wife. Mom called again. And his wife had texted his sister, and his sister had written in what she thought was a private chat. Can one of us call her so she stops blowing up his phone? Blowing up his phone. I had called my son one time for 35 minutes on a Sunday afternoon, 6 years after his father died, and that was blowing up his phone. I sat down at the kitchen table, the walnut table David had built me in 1995. I put my phone face down on it. I put my hands flat on the wood. I could feel the little scratches under my palms, the old toy car scratches from when Darius was 3. I did not cry. I want to tell you that I cried, because that would be the easier story. The story where I collapsed, where I wailed, where the grief of it came out of me like a storm. But I didn't. I just sat there. I sat at that table a very long time. Long enough that the light outside went from gold to rose to blue to dark. I did not turn on a lamp. I sat in the dark kitchen in my own house, and I tried to understand what had just happened to me. Here is what I understood that night, for the first time, even though I would not let myself fully know it for another 8 months. My children were not my friends. They were not my partners in grief. They were not 2 adults who loved me and called me and checked on me the way you check on someone you love. They were managing me. They were taking turns. They were splitting the shifts. They were treating me like an obligation to be distributed evenly between them so that neither one of them had to carry too much. And they were doing it because I had become to them a task. Not a person, a task. The woman who had sat up all night counting Darius's breaths through asthma attacks. The woman who had sold her mother's gold bracelet to pay Amani's first semester of tuition at Howard before the scholarship came through. The woman who had cut her own son's hair for 2 years because we couldn't afford the barber shop. The woman who had been room mother every single year, who had packed lunches with handwritten notes tucked inside, who had stayed up until 2 in the morning hemming Amani's first prom dress because we couldn't afford to get it tailored. That woman was now an hour of somebody's Sunday that had to be scheduled so it didn't become inconvenient. I sat at the table in the dark. I did not cry. I just thought, very slowly and very clearly, one sentence over and over, the way you turn a stone in your hand. This is what he meant. This is what David meant. Don't let them forget you. Hannah, they have forgotten you. The next part of the story is the part I knew was coming and still couldn't stop. In October of 2025, I called Darius and asked what their Thanksgiving plans were. He hesitated in that way that told me the answer before he said it. Mom, Tasha's family is doing a big thing in Hawaii this year. Her parents rented a house on Maui for a week. It's kind of a thing Linda's been wanting to do forever. We're going. That sounds lovely, baby. You could come? To Hawaii? Yeah, I mean, I'd have to ask Linda, but no, baby. That's their family trip. That's fine. Mom, it's okay, Darius. Go. Have fun. Take pictures. I hung up. I sat for a minute. I called Amani. Hey, Mom. Hey, baby. Just wondering what you and Jerome were doing for Thanksgiving. A longer pause. Mom, Jerome's mom really wants us up in New Jersey this year. She's been going through it, since his dad passed. We were thinking of doing Christmas with you instead. Is that okay? Of course, baby. That's fine. Are you sure? I'm sure. Go take care of Jerome's mom. That's important. Okay. I love you. I'll call you this weekend. I love you too. I put the phone down. I did not call either of them back. I did not ask why neither of them had thought to just come home. I did not ask why they had both, somehow, independently, decided to spend Thanksgiving with someone else's family. I told myself this is how it goes. This is what modern families are. Kids grow up, they marry into other families. Thanksgiving gets complicated. Don't be selfish, Hannah. Don't be the mother who makes them feel guilty. On Thanksgiving morning, I got up at 7. I made a small turkey breast. Just a breast, because a whole turkey for one person felt absurd. I made dressing. I made collard greens. I made sweet potatoes, the kind my mother used to make. with brown sugar and butter and nutmeg on top. I set the table for 2, not because I was expecting anyone, because Miss Ruby from next door had said she would come over at noon if she felt up to walking. She was 81, and her hip was still bothering her from the fall and the spring. She came. She made it. She walked the 30 feet between our houses slowly, with her cane, in a purple dress and pearls, the way black women of a certain age still dress for Thanksgiving dinner, even when it's only one neighbor. We sat at the walnut table. I said grace. I thanked God for Miss Ruby. I thanked Him for the food. I thanked Him for the roof over our heads. I did not thank Him for my children. I couldn't. Not that day. Miss Ruby ate slowly. She complimented the dressing. She told me about her granddaughter in Charlotte, who had just had a baby boy and named him after her late husband, Earl. She showed me a picture on her phone. After the meal, we sat on the front porch with coffee. The November air was cool but not cold. There was a breeze. A few leaves came down off the big oak in my front yard. Miss Ruby looked over at me. She had this way of looking at you. She'd lived 81 years, buried a husband, raised 4 children, lost one of them to diabetes at 46. She had this way of looking at you that saw through to the bottom of things. She said, "Hannah, baby, can I tell you something?" "Of course, Miss Ruby." "At some point, you got to stop waiting by the phone for people who already put their lives on speaker." I didn't answer. She reached over and patted my hand. Her skin was soft and thin, the way skin gets when you've worn it a long time. She didn't say anything else. We sat on the porch until the sun started to set. Then I walked her home. I helped her up the steps. I kissed her cheek at the door. I walked back to my own house, and I stood in the front yard for a minute, and I looked up at my windows. All dark, just one light on in the kitchen from where I'd left it on. I thought, put their lives on speaker. I went inside. I washed all the dishes. I put the leftovers away. I did not take a picture of anything. I did not post anything. I did not text my children to tell them I had cooked or that I had missed them, or that Miss Ruby had said something that was still turning in my chest like a small blade. I just went upstairs and got into bed and pulled the quilt up to my chin. Neither of my children called me that night. I fell asleep around midnight. I did not know it yet, but I had 2.5 months left before the morning that was going to change everything. Now I have to tell you about my 58th birthday. It was a Sunday, February the 8th, 2026. I woke up at 6 in the morning, which is the time I have always woken up. My body doesn't know how to do anything else. David used to joke that I didn't need an alarm clock. I had a cardinal in my chest. I lay in bed a minute. The bedroom was still dark. I could hear outside a mourning dove. The same 4-note call I have been hearing all my life in this city, in this neighborhood, in this house. I thought, it's my birthday. Nothing about that thought made me happy. Nothing about it made me sad. It was just a fact, like the weather. I got up. I put on my robe. I still had the old blue one. I had never thrown it out. David had been right about that robe. I went downstairs barefoot. I put on the Pyrex percolator. I sat at the walnut table while it perked. I picked up my phone. 0 new messages. 0 missed calls. I set the phone down. I told myself it was early. Darius was in Seattle, 3 hours behind me. It was barely 4 in the morning there. Of course he hadn't called yet. Imani would be asleep. It was early. Nobody was up yet. I poured my coffee. I drank it at the table. I watched the sky go from black to blue to pale yellow through the kitchen window. At 8:30, I went out into the garden. The garden was mostly dead by then. It had been for a while. The trellis was gone. I had taken it down the winter before because it was leaning too badly. There were weeds where the collards used to be. The okra was a memory. I stood there in my robe in the cold February morning, my coffee going cold in my hand, and I looked at the empty dirt where my garden used to be, and I thought, without meaning to, it just came. This is what I look like now. Inside, I went back into the house. At 9, I checked my phone. Nothing. At 10, I checked it again. Nothing. At 11, there was a knock at the front door. I opened it, and there was Miss Ruby, in a yellow dress and her pearls, holding a sweet potato pie in a glass dish covered in foil. She had walked over in the cold with her cane from next door. She said, "Happy birthday, neighbor. 58 looks good on you." She handed me a card. It was handwritten. 3 sentences. It said, "Hannah, I thank God for you. You have been a blessing to me since Earl passed. I hope this year brings you back to yourself. Love, Ruby." I stood in the doorway with that pie in my hands and the card in my other hand, and I started to cry. Not loud, just 2 tears sliding down my face, quiet as rain. Miss Ruby didn't say anything. She just reached up and patted my cheek. She said, "You come sit with me later if you need to, baby. I'll be home." Then she turned and walked back to her house. At 3 in the afternoon, Imani called. "Mom, happy birthday." "Thank you, baby. I'm so sorry I didn't call earlier. It's been crazy. Jerome's parents drove down from New Jersey unexpectedly, and I've just been running around all day. Did you do anything fun?" "Miss Ruby brought me a pie." "Ah, that's sweet. I'm going to send you something this week, okay? I meant to order it in time, but I got slammed at work. I love you so much." "I love you too, baby." "Okay, I gotta run. Jerome's calling me. But happy birthday. We'll talk soon." The call lasted 2 minutes and 41 seconds. I checked afterwards. At 6 in the evening, Darius called. FaceTime. Malik was on his lap. Malik is 7. Darius had clearly prompted him, because as soon as the call connected, Malik sang, in that loud, flat, 7-year-old way, "Happy birthday, Grandma. Happy birthday, Grandma." He got the second line wrong. He said, "Happy birthday, dear Grandma," twice. Darius laughed. "Say, dear Grandma Hannah, buddy." "Happy birthday, dear Grandma Hannah. Happy birthday to you." I clapped. I said, "Thank you, Malik. That was beautiful." Malik waved. Darius said, "All right, buddy, go find your mom." And Malik wandered off camera. Darius looked back at the phone. "How's your day going, Mom?" "It's been quiet." "Yeah? Are you doing anything fun?" "Miss Ruby brought me a pie." "Oh, that's sweet. How's she doing, by the way? Is her hip better?" "It's better." "Good, good." He glanced off camera at something. "Hey, Mom, I'm actually about to put the kids in the bath. I just wanted to make sure I caught you. Love you. We'll talk this weekend, okay?" "Okay, baby. I love you." "Love you too. Happy birthday." The call was 3 minutes and 52 seconds. I sat at the kitchen table after he hung up. The house was very quiet. The kind of quiet where you can hear the refrigerator running and the old grandfather clock in the hall ticking and the wind against the kitchen window. I looked at my phone. Total time my children had spent on the phone with me on my 58th birthday. 6 minutes and 33 seconds. 6 minutes and 33 seconds. That is how long it takes to boil an egg. That is how long a single song plays on the radio. That is how long I had been worth to the 2 people I had given 34 years of my life to. I did not move for a long time. The sky outside went dark. The kitchen got dim. I didn't turn on any lights. I just sat there at the walnut table, in my robe, with my hands folded on the wood in front of me, and I thought, I want you to understand. This wasn't an outburst. I wasn't having a breakdown. I wasn't working myself up into a rage. There was no rage. I was too tired for rage. This was something quieter. This was a woman finally, sitting down with herself and being willing to look. Here is what I thought. I spent 34 years raising those 2 children. I sat up 3 nights straight with Darius when he had the flu so bad his fever hit 105, and the doctor said if it got any higher we had to go to the hospital. I stood in a pawn shop on Martin Luther King Boulevard in 2014 and sold my mother's gold bracelet, the one she'd gotten from my father on their 20th anniversary, the one she'd given me on my wedding day, because Imani's scholarship check was late and she needed her first semester books, and I did not tell my daughter I had done that. Not then and not ever, because I did not want her to feel the weight of it. I learned how to cut a little boy's hair because we could not afford to keep sending Darius to the barber on Cascade Road, and I was terrible at it for a year, and he wore a hat to school for a year, and he never complained, and I loved him so much in those years I could not breathe. I gave up a promotion in 2003. The charge nurse position. More money, better hours. I turned it down because the hours would have meant I couldn't be home when Imani got off the bus, and she was 7, and I did not want her to come home to an empty house. I have been showing up. My entire adult life I have been showing up. I have been the one who remembers, the one who cooks, the one who sends the cards, the one who asks how they are, the one who listens, the one who drives, the one who waits by the phone. And I thought, when did I decide that I would keep showing up for people who had stopped showing up for me? When did I decide that? Because I did decide it. Somewhere along the way, without noticing, I had decided to keep pouring out of a pitcher that wasn't being refilled. I had decided to be grateful for 6 minutes and 33 seconds on my birthday. I had decided to stay small so that my children would not find me inconvenient. I had been training myself, slowly, to disappear. And the worst part, the part I could not stop looking at, now that I was finally looking, was that it had worked. I had disappeared. Not to them, maybe. I was still Mom in their phones. I was still an item on their weekend to-do list. Call Mom, but to myself. Somewhere along the way, I had stopped being Hannah. I was only a function now, a role, a mother of grown children who did not need me, a widow who ate alone, a woman with a dead garden and an old percolator and a quilt from 1987. I was a ghost in my own kitchen, and I had been the one haunting myself. I sat there in the dark and I said out loud to the empty room, "What did you become, Hannah?" My voice sounded strange in the quiet. Old, not old-bodied, old-tired. I said it again. "What did you become?" And then I said the thing I had been trying not to say for years and years and years. When did you stop? When did I stop? When did I stop singing in the choir? When did I stop going to the library on Saturdays the way I used to? When did I stop calling Deborah, my best friend from Spelman, the woman who used to make me laugh until I couldn't breathe? When did I stop calling her? When did I stop reading? When did I stop baking? When did I let the garden die? When did I take my name off the usher board at church? When did I start wearing the same 3 outfits over and over because no one was looking at me anyway? When did I stop wearing lipstick? When did I stop taking care of this body that has carried me for 58 years? When did I stop being Hannah? I put my face in my hands. I was not crying. I was past crying. I was just finally looking. I don't know how long I sat there. An hour, maybe 2. At some point I stood up. I turned on the kitchen light. I went to the sink. I washed my hands. I splashed cold water on my face. I looked at myself in the little mirror above the hand towel. The one David had hung there in 1994 so I could check my lipstick on the way out the door. The woman looking back at me was 58 years old. Her hair was going silver at the temples. She had lines at the corners of her eyes. She had her mother's mouth. She had her father's forehead. She had David's wedding ring on her left hand. She was tired. I said to her, "I see you." And she said it back to me, from the mirror, without moving her mouth. "I see you." That was the moment. That was the moment I came back. Not all the way. Not yet. The coming back would take months. The coming back is what the rest of this story is about. But that was the moment I decided. I whispered to the woman in the mirror, "I'm coming to get you, baby. I'm coming to get you." And I meant it. The morning after my birthday, I woke up at 6, the way I always do. I lay in bed a minute. The bedroom was still dark. I could hear the mourning dove outside. The same one, or a cousin of the same one, calling its 4 slow notes the way it had been calling for 58 years of my mornings. I said something to myself last night. I thought, I'd better not take it back. I want to tell you what I did first, because I think it matters. Because I think if you've ever stood at the edge of your own life and wondered how to come back into it, the answer is not big. The answer is small. The answer is what's closest. What was closest to me was the garden. I put on a pair of David's old jeans. I had kept them all these years, folded in the bottom of the cedar chest, and I put them on with a belt, because they still hung off me. I put on one of his flannel shirts, too. I put on my hair in a wrap, the way my mother used to wrap her head for yard work. I put on his old work boots. I went to the shed. The shed hadn't been opened since the summer before David died. The hinges stuck. I had to pull hard. When the door opened, the smell came out first. Dust, old grass clippings, the metallic smell of rust, and underneath all of it, very faintly, the smell of David. His sweat, his aftershave, Old Spice. I put my hand against the doorframe and I just breathed for a minute. Then I went in. His tools were still on the pegboard where he had left them in July of 2019. His old straw hat was on a nail. His gardening gloves were in a crumpled pair on the workbench, the left one still shaped like his left hand. His fingers had been permanently a little curled from an old injury, and the glove remembered. I picked up the gloves. I held them. Then I put them on. They were too big. They had always been too big for me. But I put them on anyway. and I grabbed a spade and a hand fork and a pair of pruning shears, and I walked out to the back garden in David's gloves and David's boots, and I knelt down in the dirt where my collard greens used to be. The dirt was hard. It was February. It was cold. I should have waited until March at least to start. But I didn't care. I started pulling weeds. I started with my fingers, and when the weeds wouldn't come, I used the hand fork. I worked in one little square of dirt, no bigger than a baking sheet. I cleared it. I turned the soil. I broke up the clumps. I worked for 2 hours. My back hurt. My knees hurt. The tops of my thighs burned. I had dirt under my fingernails and dirt on my face and dirt on David's jeans. And something inside my chest, very quietly, began to feel like it was breathing again. I went inside. I took a long shower. I made myself a real breakfast, eggs and toast and bacon and a half grapefruit, and I sat at the walnut table and I ate every bite of it. I had not eaten a real breakfast in years. I thought, that's one. The second thing I did was the chair. David's rocking chair had been sitting in the garage for 6 years. I had put it out there the month after he died because I could not stand to see it empty on the front porch every morning. I had wrapped it in an old sheet, and I had walked away from it, and I had not touched it since. On the Wednesday after my birthday, I went out to the garage. I pulled off the sheet. The chair was fine. Dusty, but fine. The wood was dark oak, and David had finished it himself. He had sanded it and oiled it and rubbed it down with a soft cloth over a whole weekend the year before he got sick. I carried it into the kitchen. I set it on a sheet of newspaper. I got out some wood oil and a soft rag, and I sat at the kitchen table with David's chair between my knees, and I oiled every inch of it. I worked the oil into the grain. I ran my hand over every curve. I tightened 2 screws on the underside where the joint had loosened. When I was done, the wood glowed. The chair looked the way it had looked the day he finished it. I carried it out to the front porch. I set it in the spot it had lived for 25 years, to the left of the front door, facing the street. And I sat in it. I had never sat in David's chair. Not once in all the years he was alive. It was his chair. I had my own, a wicker one on the other side of the door. I had been a good wife, and good wives. I had been taught, do not sit in their husband's chair. I sat in it. It was the most comfortable chair I had ever sat in my entire life. I sat there until the sun went down. I watched the neighborhood. I watched Miss Ruby come out to get her mail. I watched 2 little girls ride their bikes in circles at the end of the block. I watched a red-tailed hawk sit for a long time on the power line across the street. I thought, this is my chair now. I thought, I should have been sitting in it all along. The third thing I did was call Deborah. Deborah Holloway had been my best friend since we were 18 years old. We had met at Spelman College in the fall of 1985, 2 black girls from small southern towns, me from Alabama, her from Mississippi, in a dorm room together at a college that felt, to both of us, like the biggest thing that had ever happened to us. We had been roommates 4 years. We had been in each other's weddings. We had been godmothers to each other's children. She had come to David's funeral. I had gone to her husband Marcus's retirement party. And then, somehow, we had stopped. It wasn't a fight. It was the same slow thing. Life had gotten busy. She had moved to Charleston. I had stayed in Atlanta. We had texted at first. Then we had texted less. Then we had sent cards at Christmas. Then we had only sent cards when one of us thought of it. I had not talked to Deborah on the phone in 4 years. I called her on a Friday evening, a week after my birthday. I sat in David's rocking chair on the front porch. My hands were shaking a little. I did not know if she would pick up. I did not know if she would still know me if she did. She picked up on the second ring. Hannah? Her voice. Oh, her voice. I had forgotten what her voice sounded like. I had forgotten that I loved her voice. Deb, it's me. Girl, where have you been? I started crying. I am not proud of this. I started crying before I could even answer her, and I cried on the phone for what felt like 10 minutes, with Deborah on the other end saying, baby, baby, it's okay. I'm here. I'm right here. When I could finally talk, I told her everything. I told her about the birthday. I told her about the group chat message. I told her about Thanksgiving. I told her about the catfish for David's birthday. I told her about the biopsy in 2021 that I had never told anyone about. She listened. She didn't interrupt. She let me say all of it. When I was done, she was quiet for a minute. Then she said, Hannah, I'm driving up tomorrow. Deb, no. You don't have to. Hannah, I'm driving up tomorrow. I'll be there by 3. Have coffee ready. She hung up. She was in my driveway at 2:47 the next afternoon. Deborah walked in with an overnight bag and a bottle of whiskey and a bakery box of pralines from Charleston, and she hugged me on my front porch for what might have been 5 minutes. And then she said, "Hannah Washington, when is the last time you laughed?" And I said, "I don't remember." And she said, "Oh, we are fixing that tonight." We sat on the front porch that night until midnight. We drank whiskey, we talked, we laughed, we cried some. We told stories about Spellman, about our dorm mother, Mrs. Baxter, about the boy from Morehouse who had serenaded her under the wrong window and accidentally serenaded me for a full verse before he realized. We laughed about that until Miss Ruby turned her porch light on twice and then off, which was her signal that we were being loud. Then we laughed quieter. Deborah said to me sometime around 11:30, with whiskey in her voice, "Hannah, you had the loudest laugh of anyone in our class. Do you remember that? The whole dorm knew when you came home." I said, "I remember." She said, "Where did that laugh go, baby?" I said, "I don't know, Deb." She said, "We're going to find it." She stayed 3 days. When she left, she made me promise to call her every Sunday. I have called her every Sunday since. The fourth thing I did was the choir. I went to church the next Sunday, my regular Baptist church, the one David and I had joined in 1989, the one where Pastor Anthony Crawford had baptized both my children. I had still been going, most Sundays, but I had been sitting in the back row. I had been slipping in after the hymn started and slipping out before the final benediction. That Sunday, I came early. I walked up to the choir director, Sister Evelyn Mathis, after the service. Sister Evelyn is 72 years old and has been running that choir for 30 years. She knew me when my hair was still black. I said, "Sister Evelyn, I'd like to come back." She looked at me for a long time. She has these clear brown eyes that don't miss much. She said, "Hannah Washington, I have been praying for you for 8 years. I said, "Well, I'm here." She said, "Rehearsal is Wednesday at 7. Don't be late." I was not late. I sang second alto the way I always had. I stood next to Sister Denise Harper, who had been standing next to me in that choir from 1991 until I left in 2018. Sister Denise looked over at me during the first hymn and squeezed my hand. She didn't say anything. She just squeezed. My voice was rusty. It shook on the high notes. I forgot the harmony in a few places. But it was still there. My voice was still there. Alto, low and warm, the way my mother's had been. I sang the closing hymn with my eyes closed. It was Great is Thy Faithfulness. I had sung it 1,000 times in my life, but I had never really heard the words before. Morning by morning, new mercies I see. I thought, that's it. That's what I'm doing. I am collecting morning mercies, one at a time. That's how I come back. The fifth thing I did was Clarence. Clarence Thompson owns a used bookshop on Cascade Road called Thompson's Books and Curiosities. It is a narrow, crooked little shop in a strip mall between a nail salon and a barber shop. I had been going past it for 20 years and had never once gone in. I don't know why. I had always meant to. I went in on a Saturday morning in March. I was coming back from the farmer's market. I had a bag of collards and a dozen eggs. I walked past the shop. I stopped. I turned around, and I walked in. Clarence was behind the counter. He is 66 years old, tall, a little stooped now, gray at the temples, reading glasses on a chain around his neck. He was reading a hardback book, and when he heard the bell over the door, he looked up. He looked at me a second longer than he needed to. He said, "Good morning. Can I help you find something?" I said, "I'm looking for something by Toni Morrison. I want to read her again." He smiled. It was the first thing I noticed about him. His smile. He had a very slow smile. It started in his eyes. He said, "Come with me." He walked me to the Morrison section. He pulled down 3 books. Sula, Song of Solomon, Beloved. He said, "Have you read these?" I said, "I read Beloved in college. I haven't read the other 2. He said, "Song of Solomon first. That's my opinion. But you didn't ask." I laughed. A real laugh. Small, but real. He said, "How long has it been since somebody told you what to read?" I said, "A long time, Mr. Thompson." He said, "Clarence." I said, "Hannah." I bought all 3 books. He charged me $12 for the 3. He made me a cup of coffee from a machine in the back that I hadn't noticed. He said, "On the house. First-time customer." I drank the coffee standing up. He drank one with me. We talked for 40 minutes about Morrison, about James Baldwin, about Zora Neale Hurston, about the fact that he had grown up in Macon and his people were from Tuskegee, and he had been a high school English teacher for 31 years before he retired and bought the shop. I told him my people were from Greensboro, Alabama. He told me he had been through there once. I told him my husband had passed 6 years ago. He told me his wife had passed 4. We didn't make it into anything. It wasn't anything yet. Maybe it never will be anything. That's not the point. The point is, for 40 minutes, a man who had no obligation to look at me, looked at me. He listened when I talked. He asked what I thought. He didn't check his phone. He didn't say in that way that means he was somewhere else. I walked out of that shop with 3 books and the strangest feeling in my chest. I felt visible. For the first time in a very long time, I felt visible. I walked to my car. I put the books on the passenger seat. I sat in the driver's seat a minute before I started the engine. I thought, well, I'm still here. Imani called me on a Tuesday night in the middle of March. I was sitting in David's rocking chair on the front porch with a cup of tea and a book. Song of Solomon. Clarence had been right. I had started with that one. I was about 1/3 of the way through. A little chilly on the porch, but I had a blanket. My phone rang. I looked at it. Imani. I took a breath. I answered. Hi, baby. Hi, Mom. How's your week? Pretty good. How's yours? Crazy. Listen, Mom, I wanted to talk to you about something. There was something in her voice I recognized. I had heard it for years. I had not wanted to name it before. I could name it now. It was the voice of a person about to ask for something. Okay, I said. So, Jerome and I were looking at a house in Bethesda. It's beautiful, Mom. It's perfect for us. The kids we want to have one day. The whole thing. But it's expensive. And we're trying to put together the down payment, and we're a little short. I was wondering, and I know this is a big ask, but I was wondering if you might be able to lend us, I don't know, $40,000. Just to close the gap. We'd pay you back on a schedule. Jerome's already drawn up the whole... Imani. Yes, Mom? I was quiet for a few seconds. I was looking at my garden across the porch rail. You couldn't see the garden from the front porch, but I was looking in that direction anyway. I said, Imani, before I answer that, can I ask you something? Of course, Mom. When was my birthday? A pause. February. Early February. The 8th. The 8th, right. And how long did you and I talk on my birthday? A longer pause. Mom, I called you. I said happy birthday. You called me at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. You talked to me for 2 minutes and 41 seconds. You told me Jerome's parents had come down. You told me you were going to send me a gift that week. You did not send me a gift? That's okay. I don't need a gift. But I want you to know, because I think you didn't know, that the entire time my 2 children spent on the phone with their mother on her 58th birthday added up to 6 minutes and 33 seconds. Silence on the other end. I kept going. I was not angry. My voice was very calm. I was surprising myself with how calm I was. Baby, I want to tell you something, and I want you to listen, because I have never said this to you before, and I should have said it a long time ago. I am not going to be angry at you. I am not going to punish you. I want to be very clear about that. I love you. I have loved you since the minute you were born, and I will love you until the minute I die, and nothing you do or don't do is going to change that. Okay? Her voice small. Okay, Mom. But here is what I have noticed, baby. And I noticed it a long time ago, but I did not let myself look at it, because I was afraid. I was afraid that if I looked at it, I would have to say it out loud, and if I said it out loud, I would lose you. So I didn't look. I kept my head down. I kept showing up. I kept calling. I kept being the mother who does not make her children feel bad about themselves. Mom, let me finish, baby, please. Okay, here is what I have noticed. In the last 3 years, maybe longer, but at least the last 3, you have called me, on average, about once a month, sometimes less. Your brother calls me every 2 weeks. That is the rhythm we are in. And almost every time one of you calls me, there is a reason. Not a conversation. A reason. You need something. You need advice, or you need money, or you need to borrow something, or you need me to watch the dog when you're traveling, or you need to talk about Dad's estate one more time. You call me when you need something. I took a breath. Imani, I sat at my kitchen table on my birthday and I counted. In the last 12 months, neither one of you has called me to ask how I am. Not once. You have called to ask what are you doing for Thanksgiving, which is not the same thing. You have called to say happy birthday, which is not the same thing. You have called to say I'm busy. I have to go, which is not the same thing. I could hear her breathing. Baby, I am not asking you to love me more. I am not asking you to feel guilty. I am asking you to look at me. That is the only thing I have ever wanted from either of you as adults. Just look at me. See that I am here. See that I am a person. See that I am not just Mom. I am Hannah. And Hannah has had a hard 6 years. Hannah has been lonely. Hannah lost her husband, and then slowly, without meaning to, she lost her children too. And Hannah has been trying to figure out how to come back to herself, and she has had to do it alone. Mom, I know you didn't know, baby. I know. That's why I'm telling you. I paused. About the $40,000. The answer is no. She made a sound like she had been hit. Mom, let me finish. The answer is no, and I want to be clear about why. It's not because I don't love you. It's not because I can't spare it. I probably could if I stretched. The answer is no because I cannot give $40,000 to a daughter who has not asked me how I am, in any real way, in 3 years. I cannot do that, baby. Not because I want to punish you. Because I am finally trying to love myself the way I have loved you my whole life. And a woman who loves herself does not write a $40,000 check to a child who only calls her when she needs one. I took a breath. But here is what I will offer you. I will offer you this. I will call you every Sunday at 4 o'clock your time. I will call you. You do not have to remember. I will. And if you pick up and we talk, really talk for half an hour, about you and about me and about nothing in particular, for 6 months, every Sunday, without you missing more than 3, then come back and ask me about the money. And we will have a real conversation about it, as 2 women who know each other, not as a mother being asked for money by a daughter she barely knows anymore. Imani was crying. I could hear her on the other end of the line. Not the pretty, dramatic kind of crying. The real kind. The kind you can't control. She said through it, Mom, I am so sorry. I said, I know, baby. She said, I didn't know I was doing it. I said, I know. Most people don't. She said, Will you forgive me? I said, I already have, baby. I forgave you a long time ago. That was never the problem. The problem was that I had not forgiven myself for letting it happen. She was quiet. I said, I love you, Imani. She said, I love you so much, Mom. I'll call you Sunday. I said, I'll call you Sunday. 4 o'clock your time, 3 o'clock mine. She laughed a little through her crying. She said, Okay, Mom. We said goodbye. I sat on the porch for a long time afterwards. The tea had gone cold. The book was in my lap. I looked at the stars coming out over Cascade Heights. I thought, I just did a hard thing. I thought, I am not sorry I did it. Darius called me 2 nights later. He had clearly talked to Imani. I could hear it in his voice. He was nervous. He was formal in a way he hadn't been with me since he was a teenager, and he was about to confess to something. He said, Mom, I've been thinking a lot about what you said to Imani, about how we have been with you. I said, Okay, baby. He said, I want to come home. I want to fly in this weekend. Just me. I want to come sit with you. I was quiet a minute. I said, Darius, I love you. I want to be very careful about what I say next. He said, Okay. I said, If you come this weekend because you feel guilty, I don't want you to come. He said, Mom. I said, Listen to me, baby. For 34 years, I have had your guilt. Guilt is not love. Guilt is a thing you do to get rid of a feeling you don't like. I don't want you to come here to get rid of a feeling. I want you to come here because you want to sit with your mother. And if you want to sit with your mother, I will be here. But I am not going to let you come fix me in a weekend and then go back to your life and be proud of yourself for doing it. That's not what this is. He was quiet a long time. He said, Mom, that's fair. He said, Can I ask you something? I said, Yes. He said, When did I stop being a good son? And I said, Oh, baby, you are not a bad son. I need you to understand that. You are a good man. You are a good father. You are a good husband. You are a good son, in all the ways the world can see. You just stopped being present. There's a difference." He said, "Okay." I said, "I don't want you to come home to fix anything. I want you to come home when you are ready to stay a while. I want you to come home in the summer, when the garden is in, and sit on the porch with me, and eat a peach cobbler, and not have a meeting in 2 hours. That's what I want." He said, "I'll come in June." I said, "Is that a promise or a reflex?" He laughed a little. It was a sad laugh. He said, "Mom, it's a promise." I said, "Good. I love you, baby." He said, "I love you too, Mom." I hung up. I sat in David's chair. I thought about my husband, about what he had said to me, in our bed, the last day of his life. "Don't let them forget you." I thought, David, I'm coming back. I am coming back to myself, and I'm bringing them with me if they want to come. And if they don't, I'll come back anyway. I looked at the stars. I thought, David, I didn't know I could do this. I didn't know this was in me. The Sunday in June when Darius came home was the 14th. He came alone. I had told him to. I had said, "If you want to come because you want to see me, come alone. Bring the family later. I want my son first." He listened. He flew in on a Saturday night. He rented a car at the airport. He got to the house at 9 in the evening. I was sitting in David's rocking chair on the front porch. I had a pitcher of sweet tea with mint from my garden in it, and 2 glasses and a plate of peach cobbler still warm from the oven. He walked up the porch steps. He was wearing jeans and a gray t-shirt. He looked like his father. He did not say anything. He just stood there a minute. Then he bent down and he put his head against my shoulder, and he started to cry. I held my son on that porch for a long time. I did not cry. I rubbed his back the way I had when he was 4 years old and the asthma had him scared. I hummed a little. I hummed "Great is Thy Faithfulness." When he could talk, he sat down on the porch next to my chair. On the floor. He did not take the wicker chair. He sat on the porch floor with his back against the railing, and he looked up at me and he said, "Mom, I'm here. I'm really here." I said, "I know, baby. I see you." He said, "I want to see you too." I said, "Okay." We sat on that porch until 1 o'clock in the morning. He ate 3 helpings of peach cobbler. He drank sweet tea. He told me things he had never told me. He told me he had been struggling in his marriage. He told me he had been worried about money in a way that had made him anxious all the time. He told me that Malik had been getting in trouble at school, and Tasha was worried, and they didn't know what to do. He told me he had been carrying all of that by himself because he didn't want to burden me. He said, "I thought I was protecting you." I said, "Darius, I am your mother. Protecting me from your life is not love, it's distance. I would rather carry half your burden than carry the weight of not knowing you." He said, "I didn't know that." I said, "Neither did I, for a long time. I carried so much of it alone from your father, too, because I didn't want to burden anyone. I think it's a family habit. I think we're going to have to break it." He said, "Okay, Mom." He stayed 4 days. On Sunday morning, I woke up at 6. I came downstairs. I put on the Pyrex percolator. Darius was already up, sitting at the walnut table in his robe, reading the newspaper the way his father used to. He looked up when I came in. He smiled. He said, "Good morning, Mom." I said, "Good morning, baby." I poured him a cup of coffee. I poured one for myself. I sat down at the table with him. The kitchen smelled like coffee and biscuits. I was baking biscuits, my grandmother's recipe. The yellow index card was on the counter. Outside the kitchen window, I could see the back garden. It was green again. The collard greens were coming in thick and dark. The okra was reaching for the trellis David had built me. I had rebuilt it in the spring, with Clarence's help. There were heirloom tomatoes getting red on the vine, a Cherokee purple, a Brandywine, a Dixie Golden Giant. I could hear, outside, a mourning dove. The Zenith radio in the corner, David's radio, the one I had not turned on in years, was on, tuned to WCLK, the jazz station. John Coltrane, A Love Supreme. I pulled the biscuits out of the oven. I set them on the stove to cool. The butter melted into the tops in small golden pools. Darius watched me. He said, "Mom, this looks just like the old days." I said, "No, baby, it doesn't." He looked at me. I said, "The old days, I made these biscuits for other people. Today I make them because I want to. That's different. He smiled. He said, Yeah, that's different. Miss Ruby died in August. She went in her sleep peacefully on a Tuesday night. Her daughter from Charlotte called me in the morning. I went over and I sat in her kitchen with her daughter, and we cried. And I made a pot of coffee, and we planned her service. At the funeral, I sang, Great is thy faithfulness. I sang it for Miss Ruby, who had said to me on a Thanksgiving porch, At some point you gotta stop waiting by the phone for people who already put their lives on speaker. That sentence had saved my life, and she had not known she was saying it. After the funeral, I went home. I sat in David's rocking chair. I looked over at Miss Ruby's empty porch. I said out loud, Thank you, Miss Ruby. I thought she heard me. Imani calls me every Sunday now. So does Darius. Sometimes they call more than once a week. I don't ask them to. I don't have to. They just do. Imani came home for 2 weeks in September. She slept in her old bedroom. She cooked with me. She walked me around the garden. She cried in the kitchen one night because she had found one of David's old flannel shirts in the cedar chest, and she had put it on, and she said she could still smell him in the collar. I held her while she cried. I was her mother again. But I was also Hannah. Both things, at the same time. Darius came home in October with Tasha and the children. We had a long weekend. Malik helped me in the garden. He is 8 now. He asked me what collard greens were. I taught him. He pulled a few weeds. He got dirt on his jeans. He looked at me like I was a wizard. Zoe is 5. She sat in my lap on the porch. She is a quiet child. She reminds me of Darius at that age. She did not talk much. She just held my hand. Tasha hugged me longer than she usually does when they left. She said, Hannah, thank you for giving us Darius back. I said he was always there, baby. I just had to call him home. I am still seeing Clarence. It is still not anything. It might become something. I am not in a hurry. I am 58 years old and I have time. We have coffee on Saturdays. We read the same books and we argue about them. He makes me laugh. He knows my mother's biscuit recipe now. He has not met my children yet. He will, when I am ready. I have started taking a photography class at Clark Atlanta University. I always wanted to. I bought myself a camera. I have been taking pictures of my neighborhood, of the porches, of the old women in their Sunday hats, of the boys on their bikes. I am trying to photograph Cascade Heights the way I see it. Nobody has asked me to. I am doing it for me. I am singing in the choir again. I am reading again. I am in a book club with 4 women from the church, and we meet the second Tuesday of every month. I am writing, a little, just for myself, just to remember what I have learned. I am still in this house. I do not want to leave it. This is my house. It was my husband's and mine, and now it is mine, and it is the house where I lost myself, and it is the house where I came back. I will not sell it. I will die in it when the time comes, and I will die knowing whose house it was. I don't know exactly when I came back to myself. I don't know what day it was. I don't know what hour. But one morning I woke up, early, the way I always do, the way my body has always done. And I came down to the kitchen in my robe, and I put on the Pyrex percolator, and I poured my coffee, and I sat at the walnut table, and the coffee tasted right again. The garden was green through the window. The biscuits were rising in the oven. The zenith was playing something low and warm in the corner. A mourning dove was calling outside, the same slow 4 notes it has been calling my whole life. And I was Hannah, just Hannah, and I was enough. If you are watching this, and you are a woman who has felt invisible in your own family, if you are a mother whose children have drifted away without noticing, if you are a widow who has been eating alone for so long, you have forgotten what a set table looks like, if you are tired, if you are shrinking, if you are saying I'm fine so many times a day you have forgotten what fine feels like, I want you to hear this one thing from me. You do not have to rage. You do not have to cut anyone off. You do not have to change your will or lock your gate or move to a new city. You do not have to be cruel to be free. You only have to stop disappearing. You only have to tell one person, one time, the truth. I have been here. I have been showing up. And somewhere along the way, you stopped seeing me, and I stopped making you look. And I am not going to do that anymore. That is the sentence. That is all of it. Some of them will hear you. Some of them will not. The ones who hear you will come home, slowly, the way my children came home. the ones who don't, you will still have yourself. And yourself is not small. Yourself is the woman who raised them. Yourself is the woman who has been carrying the weight. Yourself is the most important person you will ever live with, because yourself is the one you wake up with every morning of the rest of your life. Start with the garden. Start with the chair. Start with a phone call to a friend you have lost. Start with a choir. Start with a bookshop. Start with a sentence you say to yourself in the mirror. I see you. I am coming to get you. My name is Hannah Washington. I am 58 years old. I live in Atlanta, Georgia, in the same house I have lived in for 34 years. I lost my husband 6 years ago. I lost myself somewhere after that, without meaning to, and I didn't notice until I had almost disappeared. But one morning I woke up, and the coffee tasted right again, and I knew I was home. If you have been where I have been, tell me in the comments where you are watching from. Tell me your name if you want. I would like to know that I am not alone. I would like to know that you are still here. We are still here. And that, my friends, is enough.